What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Shaw Locals Bears Insider Podcast. It is Friday morning, the morning after the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. The Chicago Bears have a new right tackle. Well, I guess I'm assuming right tackle, but it certainly appears to be that way in Tennessee's Darnell Wright, guys. We're just going to dive right in right away. We got a lot to talk about. I'm expecting a lot of questions and comments. And Hub, we'll start right with you. Darnell Wright is a Chicago Bear. How are you feeling after that pick?
I think it's a pretty good pick. I'm a lot happier than what could have happened, and a lot of the other things that I was hearing. We knew that the goal was to find ways not only to make the team better, but to make Justin Fields better. And improving the offensive line was part of it. But what was bugging the crap out of me, quite frankly, for the last couple of weeks, is all these people talking about taking left tackles. And yeah, I thought Paris Johnson was the best tackle in the draft, and wouldn't have been a bad thing to take him. But that is discounting what they accomplished last year by stealing what looks to be a pretty good left tackle in the fifth round. And yes, they needed to adjust the offensive line, but I just thought right tackle was a lot more important than left tackle. Darnell Wright, to me, is a pure right tackle. He is already an NFL level, run blocker in the offense. He's got some stuff to learn about pass protection, but most right tackles do. He's got great size at 6'5", almost 350. He's got great hands, which is a key to playing anywhere on the line, but especially on the right side. And they didn't stay with the pick, although I was surprised, even though they only went down one spot. I would have liked more than a fourth round pick next year. But for the most part, I'm happy with what they did on day one. I'm not sure that they could have done much better with all the uncertainty that everybody seemed to have once you got past players 15 to 20, and then you started moving into this whole group of the next 30 guys that seemed to be, impossible to put on a spot.
Sean, how about you? What's your take on Darnell Wright?
Yeah, well, Ryan Poles clearly got the guy that he wanted. He talked late last night when he did meet with us. He said that there were other teams calling, or at least one other team calling about that number 9 pick, and he didn't want to move down too far because he didn't want to miss out on Darnell Wright. He saw that as the pick and the guy that they wanted, and yeah, you can slot him right into that starting right tackle job, I would imagine. Obviously, he's going to have to compete for it, but I mean, I think it's his for the taking. And yeah, you look at him as a player. He was all SEC last year. As a right tackle, he didn't give up a sack the entire season. And as Hub mentioned, he's really, really talented in run blocking. You go watch the film. He's mauling guys out there. So that's exactly what the Bears need. We talked about how that right tackle spot was a hole when you look at this depth chart, and I think they got somebody who they can slide into that starting spot and feel good about.
Real quick, right? I thought that what the two things that Poles said that really impressed me is, number one, they're not going to nail down anything. They're not going to say anything is definite, but he did make it clear that Johnson sat on the left side and that Wright is on the right side, which I think is important. He's going to give them both a chance to do whatever, but he knows that that's where they fit. And then more importantly, what Kyle just said, he was not going to let Wright get away. And he was clear about that. That was about as close as they ever come in these things to saying something that they really mean. And that tells me that he must be one of those 6 to 8 blue players that we were told that they had, last Tuesday when we met. And I don't know if they're right or not. They don't either. But I love the fact that they've built that board, that's what they had, that's what they wanted, and that's what they got.
Make sure, if you haven't already yet, to go to shawlocal.com. We have tons of content up there from Sean and Hub from last night. We'll have more content coming your way this weekend. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube, do us a favor, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, helps other people find the show when you do that. We really appreciate that. Same thing on Facebook. Give us a thumbs up. Either way, if you drop a comment in there during the stream, we can see that. We will get to comments a little bit later just to kind of give you guys an idea how we're going to approach this, because we got a ton to talk about, and I don't want to get too distracted and going in multiple directions. We'll kind of start with this pick, talk about the trade, and then kind of expand that out, NFC North, and then we'll take your questions at the end. So if you have a question or a comment you want us to get to it, we'll get to that a little later into the show. But yeah, so I'll share my thoughts quickly on Darnell Wright. One, I agree with you guys in terms of pure right tackle. When you looked at the way the board fell, that made the most sense for the Bears when you're looking at offensive tackle. I love him in the in run protection or in the ground game. He does need to get a little better at pass protection. Hub, you're right. I mean, the Bears are potentially set at the tackle spots if this works out here, and that is a huge thing when you've already potentially got your QB as well. This offense starting to take shape, but the thing that really, what it came down to me, is you start to look at the board. Paris Johnson goes off the board. Who went at number 7? I'm blanking on the name now. Let me pull that back up here because it was someone that I found really interested for the Bears here.
Tyree Wilson went to
Tyree Wilson, who I thought if he was there at number 9 was probably going to be for the pick for the Bears. But when that happened, you looked at guys like Peter Skoronski. Like, I think we both like him as a prospect, but you don't know if he's a guard or a tackle. Some of the edge defenders, kind of tweeners, you're looking at a guy like Nolan Smith who really ended up falling farther than I even expected. I just felt like this was the correct move, unless they had some conviction to be able to trade down, into that 14, 15, 16 spot, which we had talked about. But if Darnell Wright was their guy, it made sense. But I do agree with you, Hub, quickly on this point, and I'll throw it to you at this point. I was a little surprised that they only got a 4th rounder in that deal.
Well, I was more disappointed than surprised. They moved one spot. What are you going to get from moving? And both teams knew who they were going to take. I did think that one of the things that Ryan told us last night that was very interesting, he didn't come out and say it because he's too nice a guy. He doesn't want to, say anything negative about anybody. But it was extremely clear that they had written Jalen Carter off their board. We had been talking about it for I don't know how long. There was no question when they made the deal that that's who the Eagles were going to take. And if the Eagles had stood still, Bijan Robinson was gone. I think they liked Bijan Robinson at 10. From everything I heard, he was gone at 8. And so the Eagles had to make the deal. The Bears knew what they were going to do. They knew who they wanted. But I thought the fact that they had decided that Jalen Carter just wasn't worth the risk is really interesting because it clearly is probably their second greatest need. I still think edge rusher are more important than interior defensive linemen, but they've got to build that defensive line. And actually, the guys who I had as the 2 best players in the draft, Bijan Robinson at 1 and Carter, I had him at 3 actually, went to 8 and 9, 7 and 8 right in front of them. So what else were they? Or rather 8 and 9 after they traded down. And so it seems to have worked out exactly the way they either expected it to or wanted it to, whichever one wanted is more important.
Sean, we're really all we can do is speculate here, but with the way the board set up with Jalen Carter falling to the Bears, I don't think there's any way we can interpret this. And Ryan Poles danced around it. I believe he said he was going to stick to Darnell Wright, but I think it was pretty clear from their evaluation that they weren't going to touch it.
Yeah, Poles didn't want to talk about players that they didn't pick, and you understand that on some level. But I think it was pretty clear. Their actions speak louder than their words, and the fact that they were okay moving back and picking up a 4th round pick is a clear indication that they were not going to pick Jalen Carter. That was not their plan. And so if they can move back one spot and pick up a future draft pick, good for them. Why not do that? Poles, he did dance around it a little bit, but he also said something that was interesting. And then, it was more broad, but he said something to the effect of character is always important to us. And, that really is I think what this comes down to. Obviously you like what Jalen Carter can do on the football field, but at this point where the Bears are in their rebuild, I don't know if you want to use your high value draft pick on a guy who you have questions about.
Kyle, the one thing that I've learned to be careful about over the years is being careful in what we say about what folks have told us. And I always try and get information, but not to say something that they didn't say. And this isn't a big deal, but I do think it's a significant point. Ryan Poles was trying hard not to say we wouldn't touch him. But I think what was clear was they had written him off the board. They weren't going to take the chance. I would prefer to say, I actually, the most impressed I have been with Jalen Carter since the end of the college football season was last night and the way he behaved. And he showed the right emotion and he showed the right appreciation. And he acted like somebody who understood everything that had happened. And I was impressed by what I saw. That was my biggest concern wasn't the mistake that he made with the car accidents. Kids do that, and settling and all that. It was the way he not being in shape at the combine and some of the things he was saying. He wasn't acting to me like a guy who I wanted to feel bad about what had happened, feel responsible for what had happened. But last night, I felt like I saw that for the first time. And I think it's quite possible when you consider what the Philadelphia Eagles already had on their defensive line and what they've got now. It looks like it could be a great pick for them. And I saw signs from him last night that maybe he does. Maybe it's as simple as he does still just have to grow up, and hopefully he will.
Post Super Bowl, before the news broke, Sean, Jalen Carter was widely expected to be a top 2-3 pick. Some people thought he could go number 1 overall. When the Bears still had that pick, I thought if that was a route they went, I was completely on board with it. I think Jalen Carter is that type of talent. It's when that news broke, you knew that was obviously going to complicate things, understandably so. When Seattle passed on him at number 5, which I thought was a clear need for them, a culture, particularly Pete Carroll, I felt was a guy that would be willing to take on something like that. I really started to wonder, how far Jalen Carter was going to fall. We're never going to know what happened in these one-on-one interviews, but I guess my thought on it is teams had to have not heard what they were hoping to hear out of him in that setting, right?
I mean, yeah, look, 8 teams passed on him, and you could, I guess you could say 9 too, if you throw the Bears in, even though they picked after that. 9 teams passed on him. And that tells you a lot about a guy who 2 months ago, he was widely considered top 3 pick, top 5, in some regards, maybe a potential number 1 overall pick. That speaks volumes. And I do think I agree with what Hub said. Like, Philadelphia might be a perfect landing spot for him. He doesn't have to be the star on that defensive line as a rookie, where if the Bears took him last night, there would be an awful lot of focus on him and him coming in and being dominant from the beginning. And maybe he doesn't have to be that in Philadelphia. And he's got a lot of Georgia former teammates up there. As we saw, the Eagles went and got another Georgia guy later in the first round. Quite a first round for the Eagles, picking up some defensive studs. I'm okay with the Bears passing on him. I've been saying that all along. I didn't think it was worth the risk. And clearly it wasn't for Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham.
Guys, one other thing, and I don't think I wrote about this, but I know we talked about this a month or 2 ago, but it's one other piece of this that we really can't ignore. Last year was Ryan Poles' first year. He had 3 different players have off the field issues. Nothing serious, nothing terrible. He didn't do a bad job, but a first year GM has 3 different players that they have minor concerns with. I think it accelerated the level at which he could not take the risk. He couldn't take the risk as much as some others could. Again, it wasn't, a question about Carter being undraftable, but it was just too big a risk for him to take. And I think we saw that proven yesterday.
So let's go ahead and kind of expand it out from here. As I said earlier, we will jump into the comments later in the show. But since we're talking Philly, Sean, you said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you, like a lot of pundits, are very happy with impressed with what the Eagles did, getting Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. Listen, they're 2 really good prospects. I just was spouting, talking about how much I like Jalen Carter. On field stuff's great. Nolan Smith, also like him, undersized though. I feel like this is much more boomer bust than maybe people are giving that credit for.
Yeah, I think absolutely. We can talk about how they quote unquote won the night last night, the Eagles. But we don't know how this is going to pan out. Obviously, we've just talked about our concerns with Jalen Carter, and with Nolan Smith. There's the potential's there. He's shown some good things on the film. He's also missed some time with injury, and he doesn't have the length of, say, a Tyree Wilson or like a Will Anderson. He's not. There's a reason those guys were taken in the top 10. But I was surprised that Nolan Smith fell that far down to the Eagles. They were in a spot to pick him. I don't know about you guys, but I did think he would be taken somewhere in the teens. To fall down into the late 20s was a little bit of a surprise for me.
I actually had Smith at number 12 on my best player available board, and I think that was where he fit based on his college performance, but knew he could drop a little further. His lack of size is really the injuries. Everybody's going to get hurt, and everybody eventually is going to get healthy, and some don't. You can't. You got to be careful when you start using injury, unless it's whether the injury is healed or not. And I don't think that's the case with him. But in his case, for the only position he's going to play, he doesn't have the size right now. He's going to have to put on some weight and strength, and to do that at 12 or 14 or 16, it's hard to do. And I think it tells us a lot that he lasted until 30. And it definitely would have been too high of a pick for the Bears at 9 or 10, even though it was their greatest need, and he was the third edge rusher on most boards. So I think the Eagles. They took some chances, and it may work out great. Everything else has worked out pretty good for them the last 4, 5, 6 years. They could also miss on both of them, so we were just starting this process now and have about 4 or 5 hours to focus on it until we get to rounds 2 and 3. But I haven't decided yet who had the best first night and who had the second. Spending most of the night looking at that and trying to figure it out. But the Eagles aren't on my top 5 list. I think they did some interesting things, but we'll see how it works out.
And they're a team, as you kind of said there, Hub, they're a team that's in a position to take some risks.
Yeah.
They have such a good roster top to bottom. With 2 first-round picks coming into the night, it's not a huge surprise to see them swing for the fences, and maybe they work out, maybe they don't.
Guys, I still believe firmly that if that official doesn't blow that call with 2 minutes left in the Super Bowl, that the Eagles not only go to overtime, but that they're the Super Bowl champs. They were a better team to me and I'm not knocking the Chiefs. They deserve it. They got what they deserve. But again, that's how good they are, and they can take chances like that. The Bears are in a complete rebuild. They cannot take chances like that.
Let's go over to the NFC North, and we'll start with Detroit, which had what I guess personally I'll call a weird night. They trade down, take Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs at number 12, and then end up taking Jack Campbell out of Iowa linebacker at number 18. Let's talk, I guess, the running back first. I like Jahmyr Gibbs, guys, but they gave David Montgomery starter money. Am I losing my mind? DeAndre Swift is still under contract, right? Like he's still in Detroit, and I know he's had some injury issues, obviously, early in his career. But when you combine those two things, Jahmyr Gibbs just was not a pick I was looking at number 12.
I think the answer for that one, Kyle, is simple. They must have had Gibbs ahead of Bijan Robinson on their board, because to take him at 12, they would have gotten him in the second round. And they probably would have gotten the linebacker in the second. I mean, those were the two, every year we look for this, and for one team to get both of them, but the two most overdrafted players in the first round last night, I think they took both of them.
I just realized, too, you combine that with the fact that they're first round pick, number 4, Jameson Williams last year, going to be out. Is it 6 games for?
Oh yeah, 6 more games after missing half of last year.
Yeah, for the gambling. Yeah, definitely a bit of a weird time now in Detroit.
Well, let's add to it. They also just traded the 3rd pick in the first round 3 years ago for a 5th round draft choice. Now that's a different GM, I believe, but still, it hasn't been a good few years for them, and they're still marching down the same path.
You look at the teams who were picking directly after 12, and I'm scratching my head trying to figure out who the Lions thought was going to swoop in and take Jahmyr Gibbs. The Packers, the Steelers, the Jets, the Commanders, the Patriots, maybe. I don't know. I'm like, they just way overdrafted. They could have traded back and still got him. If you love him that much and you absolutely don't want to miss out on him, you still could have got him with your 18th pick.
Yeah, well, let's be clear, guys. Gibbs is a very good football player.
Oh yeah,
I'm not saying they got a bad player. It was all about this devaluation of the position that everybody was so focused on, and I've been trying to say it for 2-3 months now. Running backs are every bit as important today in the NFL as they've always been. It's just that most teams were convinced that you could get them later than you could. But I think it was proven last night that if you've got a really good one or a couple, that they're going to go where they should. And I think Gibbs went too high, but Robinson, I think, is a steal at number 8. And so now we wait and watch him play and see how they turn out.
I'm not shocked that 2 running backs went in the first round, but I'm shocked that the team that just signed David Montgomery drafted one. That the whole strategy is just a head scratcher.
I do want to give props to both of you guys. One, Hub, you've been calling Bijan Robinson as a guy that could be a top 10 pick despite the running back evidence. And Sean, in your first and your final mock draft, had Bijan Robinson going to Atlanta at number 8. You just you had something there, huh?
I don't know why that made so much sense in my head. You know, the Falcons are one of those teams that I can't figure out. I don't know what they're doing at quarterback. I don't know what they're doing with Kyle Pitts. They got a bunch of running backs. Heck, let's add another one. Why not?
Yeah, I had no idea the Falcons were that married to a running back. But, guys, I think I wrote it, and I know I said it on one of our live streams. I watched a lot of tape on Robinson because the more I thought about it, the more I thought maybe he was special. And the more tape I watched, the more I saw Walter Payton. I'm not talking about size or anything. I'm talking about style. I'm talking about personality. And I think that this kid is going to be a very special running back. And if you can get one, you got to take him. And, 7 teams passed, and the 8th team was smart enough not to pass 10 more spots.
I feel like I've gushed about Bijan Robinson enough on this podcast over the last couple of months. Yeah, it's a great pick. You combine him, as Sean was saying, with Kyle Pitts and Drake London, a good young offensive core there. Outside of, I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. I don't feel very good about Desmond Ridder, guys. I don't know about you, but
they can give it, give it a shot this year, but if it doesn't work out, they're going to have to figure something out.
There's another thing to realize here, guys, and I think we've talked about it a little bit, but in case anybody forgot, Will Levis is still on the board. These quarterbacks were overrated. That's why the Bears traded the number 1 draft pick. It's not that I think that they're hopeful that Justin Fields will be their guy. He may turn out to be. He has shown enough to be hopeful of that, but he clearly has not shown it yet. And the Bears had the number 1 overall pick. Normally, when you have that, if there's a quarterback that you're comfortable with, you take him no matter what. And the Bears didn't. They traded the pick. And now as you look around the league and you look at Levis still being available, the kid from Tennessee is still available. These quarterbacks were overrated. And that's why teams are not investing too heavily in them this year.
Sorry, I just saw a comment pop in about Kyle and Sean have been taking running backs high all year. Listen, I don't think taking a running back 8th overall is a good pick in terms of the way NFL evaluation or NFL builds a team now. But what I'm trying to say about Bijan Robinson is he's worthy of that pick because he's such a special talent. There can be a disconnect there. There can be 2 separate thought processes there. And, Bijan Robinson could be an incredible pick at number 8. We could also find out that, Tyler Algier would have been damn good enough for this team. I don't know.
Guys, I'm not defending you because you're my teammates. I'm just going to state the facts. You never bashed taking a running back too high. That has been the attitude around the NFL, that running backs have been devalued. They have been in some respects. All we were doing was reporting the news, not criticizing the decisions that teams were making. In our line of work, you really can't do that because we're not doing the jobs that they're doing.
And to bring us back to the Lions really quick, Jack Campbell at 18, that also felt like a bit of a reach, guys.
Jack Campbell is the only player drafted so far that I didn't have in my top 50. Not that my list is that important, but I will tell you that I had every other guy taken last night in our top 40. Jack Campbell came out of nowhere to me. I mean, he's not a bad football player, but to take him where they took him, they see something that apparently nobody else does.
Yeah, I felt Detroit could have gone multiple ways with that pick. Linebacker is a fine way for them to go. Jack Campbell caught me off guard. One pick, staying in the NFC North, though, that I really, really loved. Jordan Addison to the Minnesota Vikings. That is going to be a problem. When you combine him with Justin Jefferson, holy hell, can that offense be a lot of fun. And not just a couple of years down the road. Like Jordan Addison, I think is a kind of a plug-and-play wide receiver in that offense. The Vikings are going to be fun on offense, guys.
Addison was my number 2 wide receiver. He went either right before or right after my number 1, Quentin Johnson. They're 2 very different players. I think Addison is going to be the best big play guy at the position in this draft. And you're right. The Vikings, they made an excellent pick.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun to watch. Those 2 guys pair up on offense. Kyle, I mean, they can slot him in a starting job right away, I would think, barring injury or anything.
And then quickly with Green Bay, I don't have a ton of thoughts on Lucas Van Ness going to the Packers.
Kind of
Quality
makes sense to
player.
me. It kind of makes
Yeah,
sense
like
to me,
it.
you know?
Yeah, it certainly made sense. I didn't think it was the biggest need for the Packers. I really think they need to improve at wide receiver and tight end still. And I thought there were some guys on the board that made a lot of sense there. That being said, Lucas Van Ness is a solid pick for the Packers. I don't really have any analysis past that though.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to build out, they have some good defensive linemen there, and Lucas Van Ness doesn't have to be a stud right away. He can be a guy coming off the bench his rookie year if you need that, in certain looks and whatnot. And from that perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Guys, I was sure that the Packers were going to get some help for their new quarterback, and they have a huge need at tight end. And it didn't occur to me until just now, but I don't think a tight end went in the first round. And there were 2, maybe 3 with first round grades.
There was one, Hub. Dalton Kincaid went
late. Yeah.
Bills.
Right.
Yeah, Kincaid went late. Where did he end up going? The Bills, what was that?
The Bills at 25. The Bills
28.
Traded up a couple spots for him.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so let's dive into the second round here and what we're expecting tonight. Also, everyone who's been dropping in comments, if there's someone you want us to address, throw that back in there. We'll try and get into that here in the second half of the show. Resetting the board here. You got Will Levis still on the board. That's going to be a major topic going into this second round. With the Bears having taken a right tackle here, there's multiple ways they can go with this pick. I think myself, and I'm guessing a lot of fans will agree with me, though, they got to get better on the defensive line one way or another here with these 3 picks on day 2, right, Sean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you still need another edge rusher. You still need another defensive tackle. I would think they're going to look at both those spots here in the second and third round. And unfortunately, there's as things sit right now, if they don't trade up, there's going to be 20 other teams, something like that, picking before them. And there are a lot of good pass rushers. There are a bunch of good defensive tackles on the board still. But if you want to get one of those top guys, it may take a trade up. I don't know if that's where Ryan Poles is, if that's what he's thinking at this point. I don't know if he wants to give up draft capital to move up a few spots. But if you do sit back and wait, you still have that opportunity to get three promising players in that area.
Yeah, I think listening to Ryan last night, he talked about it. I think they're looking to trade up. I think they'd like not to have to. You don't want to give up anything if you don't have to. But he knows that he's got to get, and I think it has to be edge rusher. Yes, they need help all up and down the defensive line, but they addressed it, fairly significantly in free agency, with another defensive tackle, and they got to get an edge rusher. And there was a bit. I've never seen a run at a position like the run that went at wide receiver from 20 to 23. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was unbelievable, 4 out of 5 picks. But then after that, there was a bit of a run on the last few edge rushers, but there's still, 2, 3, maybe 4 guys who all have things that they have to learn, ways that they have to grow, but have the physical ability and performed in college to the point where they could become excellent NFL edge rushers. And I think that run, which started late, could continue early tonight. And I think the Bears may have to come up, 10, 12 spots, not without knowing which guy they want to get the guy they want. But I think that they better, because if they don't address the pass rush, the defense is already better at linebacker. They could take a cornerback. There's some very good cornerbacks left. But I think that what Ryan Poles is thinking right now is, all right, how much do I have to trade to get the guy I want to rush the passer?
And I'll just throw out some names here. B.J. Ojulari from LSU, Keon White from Georgia Tech, Derek Hall from Auburn, Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. I mean, those are all guys who are widely expected to be in that second round range. And, the Bears might have to move up to get one of those guys.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say quickly, in case nobody noticed me looking at my list right just now, because my memory still sucks. But I had Ojulari as my number 4 edge rusher, and I had him going in the first round. And
I think he's going to go really quickly tonight.
Yeah, he's exactly the guy that I am focused on, and I don't see him lasting to 53. He was first team All-American last year. he had 14 sacks or something like that. I mean, the kid's there's some questions about development, but that's a name that I would definitely think about as the day unfolds.
I like Ojolari a lot. The kid out of Northwestern that I'm not going to butcher his last name. And then actually on the interior of the defensive line, the kid out of Wisconsin, is it Keanu Benton?
Keanu, yep.
Yeah. He's probably not going to last to 53. I like him quite a bit too. What do you guys think of him?
I think he's a good player, but I have a problem with Wisconsin players ever since the Van Ness thing. I just understand how they ran that program.
Wait, Van Ness was Iowa.
I'm sorry. I was thinking Iowa and I said Wisconsin. No, but yeah, you're right. You're guys. The best edge rusher in this draft could easily come out of the 5th round. I mean, it happens all the time. There's a guy in the Hall of Fame who played a few years with the Bears who came in the 8th round. So I mean, but our job today is to go over the analysis that we've been working on for the last couple of months and talk about who teams have as the top prospects.
I think Kyle, I think Keanu Benton is exactly the type of mold that, or at least body type wise, that the Bears would be looking for. 6'3", 309 pounds. He's not necessarily a space eater. He's not, Siaki Ika from Baylor is up at 335 pounds. He's going to eat up a lot of space, but they're looking for athletic guys. And Keanu Benton fits that.
Not to go backwards, guys, but just one other note relative to what Sean just said. We know that, Matt Eberflus is a defensive-minded coach, and we've talked about his hits principle enough, and he's not going to go for a 350-pound defensive tackle. They want somebody who's going to fit that hits principle, and that's the guy that Sean's talking about, or that's one of the guys, I should say, that Sean's talking about.
I don't see Benton being a guy they would trade up for. Maybe a few spots from 53, but if those edge rushers do come off the board early and they can't get up to get one of those, I think Benton would make a lot of sense at 53. Mr. Shorty commenting here with, damn, that number 32 pick would be nice right now. Yeah, the pick the Bears traded for Chase Claypool, of course, would be wonderful right now. A name really quickly, a pick that I loved at the very end of the first round last night. You talk about having that 31st or that 32nd pick. I loved the selection for the Kansas City Chiefs. But Felix, blanking on the name because I was trying to make sure I didn't destroy it earlier when I was doing pronunciations, and now I don't have it in front of me. So Uzoma is the end of it there. But I thought that was a really good pick for Kansas City, and I thought that was a name that the Bears could target if they decided to move up in the 2nd round.
Yeah, he definitely was there on the list. I don't think any chance would have lasted to 53. And as we've already discussed, it's something that the Bears have to. Ryan Poles was talking about it at midnight last night. He knows, that he's got to get help at edge rusher, and I think he knows that may be what he has to do to get the guy he wants. So, obviously, we would all love to be able to see their board the day before the draft, and we'd have a better sense of what's going on right now. I don't think any of us had Darnell Wright coming, at number 10, but I am comfortable with what he accomplished last year in his first draft and with the way he described the move on Wright and the way they made the pick, that Ryan Poles does know what he's doing here, and now I would love to know who their edge rusher is that is the next Darnell Wright.
Let's see. I'm not even going to try and sound out that name there, but we'll just say got a comment here. Say fingers crossed from John Michael Schmitz, the center out of Minnesota. Definitely a guy to watch late in the 2nd round, 3rd round. Do you guys think that the Bears will address center? I know from being on social media, a lot of Bears fans still want more reinforcements on the offensive line today.
I just think when you're the worst team in the NFL, you can't spend all your capital on one position. The offensive line is not the only position that plays football, and they have significantly improved it, I think, by keeping Johnson on the left side, by adding Wright on the right side, and don't forget, the addition to the guard. That it's an interesting, position to consider, an interesting player to consider. But I don't know how you can draft a center that high after using the 10th pick on a tackle and, the other areas that you have to address. It's centers and guards aren't that hard to find. I mean, how many centers and guards are there in the Hall of Fame? I mean, these every year there's new guys that make the Pro Bowl. A lot of good football players, and you can get them all through the draft. And so with 3 picks, of the next 33, I wouldn't rule anything out if you got one more on the offensive line. But I'd much rather see him address the defensive line and cornerback than worry about getting a center right now.
The Bears have Lucas Patrick and Cody Whitehair, who can both play that center spot, have both done it in the past. They got Doug Kramer, a guy they drafted last year who wound up missing the whole season because of injury and who was having a good start to his training camp last year. We don't really know what Doug Kramer is going to be, but I would be surprised if they drafted a center that high. I could see them taking one day 3, but I don't know about that high.
Yeah,
I agree.
Guys, Whitehair is actually a fairly good football player, and his contract is up after this year, but he's only about 30 or turning 30 or 38. So he's not that old. It's just, center to me just doesn't make the top 5 of the Bears' needs right now.
Yeah, it's nothing against John Michael Schmidt, but I completely agree with you guys. The Bears just have greater needs at center that they can use on these day 2 picks. And Sean, I agree. I do think you're going to see them grab 1, if not 2 interior linemen on day 3. Doug Van Dorn. We have 3 picks today. I want to see a 3 tech, an edge, and a center as new Bears by this time tomorrow. I think we already hit on all 3 positions. Clearly 3 tech and edge are at the top of the list for the Bears. But if we cast aside center there, what is another position that you think the Bears could focus on today? How about start with you?
I think the best tight ends are all still there, and I don't think it's a need. I really like Cole Kmet. They got to decide whether they re-sign him before the end of the season or after the season. But you need at least 2, and if you have 2 really good ones, you're in good shape. And they're going to be, if they don't trade up at 53, I think there's a very good chance the best player available is going to be a tight end. I've also talked about cornerback. They've got to get at least one more capable of starting, who maybe becomes the number 3 and grows into a starter. And you need 2 safeties, not just 1. And another safety wouldn't bother me either. I don't think there's been a safety drafted yet. I think that they've really addressed the offense. I don't know. Do we feel that they're set at running back? I like both guys. I think that they could be pretty good the way they run the offense. But I think they're going to draft a running back somewhere with one of these 10 picks. I don't know which one.
Let me see if I can find the comment. Someone had asked, here it is. I want to hear Hub's take on potential running backs like Devin Akane, I believe is how you say it. What do you think of the Bears potentially taking a running back?
Well, the guy I wanted is gone.
I wanted Bijan Robinson or bust. So.
I spent so much time on him. I've looked at a lot of the other running backs. I don't have the young man he's asking about written up right now. I have him in our top 30, but I'd have to go back and look. I apologize, but everybody assumed that if something interesting happened with running backs, it could only be with the 2 that were taken in the first round. And I'm going to spend time today before the second round starts going back and looking at the rest of them. But I apologize. I'm not going to make up an answer for you right now.
Here's the thing about a lot of these guys who are sitting here in the second round. They're small. Devin Achane is one of those guys for the Texas A&M running back. He's 5'8", 188 pounds. If you want a speedster, who's maybe a little undersized, you can find that. But there's very limited options for bigger guys. Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, Charbonnet, I don't know how you say it. He's a little bit bigger guy. Another interesting one who's a bigger guy is Rashawn Johnson, the Bijan Robinson's backup at Texas. Didn't get as many touches because he was playing behind a really, really good running back, but he looks like a really quality option too, but maybe a guy that you don't have as much film on.
My problem with running backs in the draft and the way things are done now, why you're seeing a lot of guys go to these 2 to even 3 guy backfields, is because you're not getting a lot of complete 3-down back. Bijan Robinson, absolutely is that guy. One guy that I do feel could potentially is the kid out of UCLA that we were talking about, Charbonnet. Is that how you say it? We don't know.
Charbonnet?
I'm so bad at pronunciation. There's a reason. There's a reason I went into print journalism. I was not expecting to be doing live streams in my career and have to pronounce names live. But he is a combo back that could fill the role, but he's going to be probably gone in the second round. And I just don't think the Bears can afford to spend one of those 2 second-round picks on someone at the running back position.
Well, there were some people thought no running backs with first-round grades. With 2 gone, there are definitely no running backs left with second-round grades. Maybe the third round, most likely day 3 is going to be a running back day. And so, and by the way, this poor kid that I keep beating up, whose name I can't remember, who rushed for 700 yards for the Bears last year.
Herbert.
I mean, he led the NFL in average yards per carry. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry. The problem is that he's not a blocker and he's not a great receiver, so he's not your starting running back. But to draft another, undersized speed guy makes no sense. You've got that now. You're set at least for 2 years, left on his contract. And so if you're thinking running back, you're thinking about a future starter who has to be bigger, has to be stronger, and has to be complete. He has to be a receiver. He has to be a blocker. And there's just not many of those guys in this draft.
Let's see. Sophisticated thought. Darius Rush, Cam Smith, Joey Porter Jr., Jacorian Bennett, Tariq Stevenson, Julius Brents, all still there to be had at cornerback. It is a deep draft at cornerback. I expect Joey Porter Jr. to go off the board really fast tonight, guys. I don't see the Bears making a trade up for a cornerback. But that is certainly a position, Sean, that the Bears could address here on day 2. Any names stand out there on that list?
I don't expect them to trade up for a cornerback. If they're going to trade up, I think it's going to be an edge rusher or somebody on the defensive line. But I would say that cornerback is on my list. That's one of those positions that I think they could absolutely get tonight. Obviously, Porter stands out on that list, but like you said, he's going to be gone pretty quickly. Cam Smith is a guy from South Carolina who, has been impressive in my mind. But again, it's hard to know. A lot of these guys might be gone in these first 20 picks. If he's there when the Bears are up, I could totally see that happening. Cameron Mitchell is another guy who might be a 3rd-round pick, who's a local guy from Bolingbrook out of Northwestern. If you sit back and wait till your 3rd-round pick there, that first pick of the 3rd round, he's going to be there. There's going to be options for them if they want to find a cornerback. And I do think that they need to find somebody who can challenge Kindle Vildor for that 3rd cornerback spot.
Yeah, Porter Jr. and Cam Smith are 2 guys that I had with first-round grades on them, and Porter Jr. I had in the middle of the 1st round.
Yeah.
And so would love to have him, but he's not going to last. And he is there's a lot of good corners left, but the only one I would consider trading up for is Porter Jr. I mean, he's the one that is that interesting. And if they do trade up, I don't think it's going to be at cornerback. I think it's going to be at edge rusher. It's just, as much as they need a 3rd corner who maybe becomes a 2nd corner, you've got 2 decent starters right now, and you don't have a starting edge rusher. And I think there's still a good chance that the best prospect available is going to be an edge rusher. So that's where I think their focus is going to be.
Doug checking back in with it. I think it's Charbonnet. I appreciate that, Doug, saving us there. Like the phonetic spelling. Yeah, guys, I really think edge rusher, when you talk about how deep that position is, that seems like the way the Bears, if they're going to trade up, that's most likely the way they go. We've named several of them already, but Sean, what is an ideal scenario in terms of how far they can come up and maybe some names? What do you see unfolding tonight?
Yeah, it's hard to say. As far as if I'm looking at the prospects available, we know how much Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus value length, on those edge spots. I'm looking at an Isaiah Foskey who's 6'5" and has long arms. I'm looking at Derek Hall, who's got 34-inch long arms and had some good production out of Auburn. But yeah, it's going to kind of come down to, who's looking to move back in those early picks. And the nice thing about day 2 is it always seems like we get those, the GMs have 24 hours to cool off and make some calls. And there's always teams who are trading up into those 30s. And so I would expect we're going to see a fair amount of movement early once things get started here tonight. And the Bears could be one of those teams involved.
Guys, going through the history of the NFL, the one thing about edge rushers is that they are developed as much as drafted as ready, finished products, probably more than any other position. When the Bears drafted Richard Dent in the 8th round, nobody had a clue what they were getting, but he had one thing that you can't teach, and that was size. And as you look at a lot of these edge rushers that are on these boards in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th round, is the one thing they all have in common is that most of them are 6'5", 6'6", and 250, 260 pounds. And probably the best edge rusher to come out of this draft, I shouldn't say probably, but it's possible, it's even likely that one of those players is going to be the best one. So they can definitely still fix the need. It's about their evaluation, and it's about how they have them on the board right now. We've got 25 names for you. But which one's going to be the best NFL player? I mean, Will Anderson, was the guy, that never changed. There's always 3 or 4 that are better than the rest. But right now, there's a lot of depth there, and they can get help, and they may not have to trade up to do it, but it's a question of what does their board look like compared to the other 31 teams.
Chargers GM AJ Smith was quoted earlier this week, essentially just saying there wasn't a lot of new news when it came to the Austin Eckler situation. And we had a comment here asking any chance of trading a later pick for Eckler. And I'm actually going to zoom that out a little bit. Hub, have you heard any rumblings at all of someone like Austin Eckler moving during the draft? I do think the Chargers might move him at some point this offseason. I don't think it's happening during the draft, though, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't heard really anything about a trade. And so of course, if there's one team that wants him badly enough, they'll make it happen. But if we're asking about the Bears, that's to me not the way I want to do a rebuild. I want to do it in the draft. I like what they did in free agency. They got youngsters in free agency. I realize Eckler's not old, but it's just not where I think the Bears' focus should be right now. I think they should be getting the youngest prospects they can, who they think have a chance to be great players, and not give up anything extra for them. They've made trades now. They've been very active in free agency, and spent a lot of their record level of capital. And if you do deal for Eckler and he is the player you want, then you're going to have to get another contract done for him. And so that's just not the way I would go if I was the Bears.
I know Eckler's upset and he wants a new deal, but I also don't think that the Chargers have to be in any rush to move him. I mean, that's one of those things where, if he wants to hold out during training camp or hold in, whatever they're doing nowadays, you can let it get to that point before you hit the panic button and trade him.
I'm always interested by these guys who want what they want, but they have no leverage to get it.
He has no leverage. Yeah.
Eckler is a classic example. I mean, if they want to deal him, they will. If they don't, they won't.
Yeah, like if he's a big enough nuisance, like running back, that is a type. If someone wants to overpay for him, I'm guessing the Chargers would go ahead and move Eckler just because running back is that position that we were talking about, like, right? But I don't see the Bears being the team that does that unless Ryan Poles really convinces themselves that he's the missing piece for a team that's ready to contend. And that's not what he thinks right now. So Austin Eckler to the Bears, I don't think that's an option at really any point this offseason.
Kyle, real quick, just while we're on this, one thing I wrote about the other day that we haven't talked much about, but I'm not so sure that finding out about Chase Claypool this year isn't as important as finding out about Justin Fields. I mean, it turns out you really overpaid for him. You gave what technically is a first round pick, wasn't, but in the 32nd pick in the draft, and they don't know exactly what they have. If you go back and look at his rookie year, he actually started out as a kid who could develop into a number one, receiver, or certainly a number two. And if you've got that in him with the trade, you've got some depth there now. I think that is another big key to finding out what you've got in Justin Fields, is if Claypool can become the player that they thought he would be when they traded for him.
Sean, I don't know about you, but when the Chase Claypool trade went down, I thought it was a great move for the Bears. Hub, we can go back to, you can probably go back on our YouTube channel and find us raving about Chase Claypool. I think it was probably with Arthur. You know, that year of that draft, we were doing a live stream, one of the first ones we did. All three of us loved him, and all three of us thought it was a great pick for if he had, for the Bears. It's been a weird couple of years in Pittsburgh, but you were absolutely right. Like, the Bears have to determine, are they going to pay this kid or not?
Well, I mean, his rookie year, he had over 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. It's not like he was a bust.
Yeah.
He just, it didn't work out in Pittsburgh. He hasn't stayed healthy all the time. He looks like he may be a number 2 as opposed to a number 1, but everybody needs a number 2, and they're not that easy to find. And if you already have them, that's one less thing to fix. And I think that looking at that rookie year, there's a chance that they do have. And by the way, he is going to be better with a number 1 in front of him, and Fields is going to be better with a 1 and a 2. So I am really interested in seeing what happens with Chase Claypool.
Yeah, he had some more talent around him that rookie year with the Steelers, and I think that'll be a really good thing for him, especially when you look at the end of last year. There were times he was playing without Darnell Mooney, and then obviously Justin Fields got hurt and Claypool got hurt too. I think you put all these guys together, see how this plays out. You don't have to make a decision on Claypool till after the season, but you guys are right. I mean, this is a huge season for Chase Claypool.
It's really wonderful the Bears have 2 first-round picks next year, because, if things go a little haywire, let's say you do see enough from Justin Fields that you want to consider, but you don't get what you need out of Chase Claypool, you decide you don't want to pay Darnell Mooney, or you only want to pay one of the two, you're in perfect position to grab a fantastic wide receiver in that first round next year. And you look at the way the Bears have now built this offense. Obviously, you got Fields, you got the offensive tackles. They went out, added DJ Moore. They improved the tight end position. I think Robert Tonyan was an underrated signing. Hub, we've talked all offseason about the Bears needing to give Justin Fields the proper tools. I don't think anyone can say that Ryan Poles hasn't done that. Are you, at this point with what they have, I'm not saying they're going to go all defense with the rest of these picks, but would you be, I guess my question is, how heavily do you expect them to slant defense in these with these next picks?
Well, I think when you look at Matt Eberflus's style and what he wants to do on defense, with everybody's defense, the pass rush is the key, but particularly with what he doesn't have now and what he hopes to accomplish, they've got to address the edge rushers. They've got to get at least 2, not just 1, and if they take 3, I'm fine with that. And then they've got to get better on the interior as well. I don't think that they have, 2 safeties. I think they're really good with 1, and we know that they need another cornerback. They're not, the one thing I feel fairly confident in saying is they're not going to draft another linebacker. But I think the heavy focus, at least tonight, with these 3 picks, has to stay on the defense, and then once you get to day 3, it's purely best athlete available and guys that you think something about that other teams don't.
Yeah, Sean, the Bears, as I was saying, the offense has gotten deeper. You look at the linebackers that they signed in free agency, the secondary need depth there. The Bears need depth across the board still. But at the end of the day, you've seen improvement, as I said, secondary, linebackers, offense coming together. It's just such a glaring need for pass rushers, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we keep talking about the possibility that they could trade up tonight, because you need a pass rusher, but you need somebody who can come in and be a starter for you, pretty quickly. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they do look to move up to get one of those top pass rushers. You look at a team like the Rams sitting there at 36, who have been somewhat vocal about wanting to they're kind of setting a little mini reset here after a tough season last year, and they don't have a ton of draft capital. Maybe they're a team that's looking to move down. You can get up there in that 5th spot tonight. I could see the Bears doing something like that. I mean, they need talent at that edge rusher spot. They need guys who can be difference makers. And I don't know if you want to sit back and wait for somebody to fall to you. Hub's gonna call.
Okay, where was I there?
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
no, that's all right. But 36, you were saying that's where I was going with this. I was trying to figure out. Yeah, 36 is certainly a potential trade partner of the Rams. Guys, Hub, who else early in that second round is someone that would potentially be willing to trade out of their spot if the Bears wanted to move up?
Oh gosh. I mean, anybody, I hadn't really thought about, which teams are still desperate for what they didn't get. I think that's really the question that we're asking. And even more important, that who are the best football players still available, and which are the teams that would make a move because they have needs in that area. I think that we've already talked, about Joey Porter. Hey, I'm sorry, guys. Molly, knock it off.
Molly,
you guys want to meet Molly? Yeah. I think that Joey Porter Jr. is probably the best player on the board right now. Any team that needs a cornerback is likely to come up for them. The other thing we haven't talked about, guys, is that Lucas Van Ness and I forget the Tennessee kid's name, but the two quarterbacks are going to go early tonight. They weren't supposed to come out of the first round. Well,
hold on. So you said Lucas Van Ness.
I said Lucas Van Ness.
Yeah, you're talking about Will Levis. Yeah, okay.
Will Levis and Malik Hooker.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Levis and Hooker are going to go fairly high tonight. And so when you start talking about trades, who else still wants a quarterback? I think that may be the story of at least the beginning of the second round. Because I don't think Levis should have gone in the first round. I think he's fine right where he's at. I actually like Hooker a little bit more, but they both should go high tonight. And so I think going back to that group of teams that want a quarterback is what we want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I'll throw out another team too who has a first-year GM and who we saw moving around a lot last night is the Arizona Cardinals with the 33rd pick. Obviously, they need to get better, so they may just hold on to that pick and take the best player available. But they weren't afraid to move around last night, and so maybe they could be looking to move down too.
I think Arizona is an interesting choice there, Sean. I think Joey Porter Jr. is going to be the first player off the board tonight. I think the Steelers are going to stay there and take him at 32. It's such a clear need. It also makes just so much sense with obviously being the son of a pretty damn good linebacker in Joey Porter with the Steelers. But outside of that, the Rams at 36. And Hub, yeah, you're right. You look at it, and it's interesting how this board falls because you look at teams like Seattle, the Raiders down there, both teams sitting at 37 and 38. Guys are teams that while in the short term have answers at quarterback, are teams that you could see take a guy here in the second round.
Yeah, I actually was just looking at the Cardinals and the Raiders, thinking, quarterbacks there. It's not too high by any means for those guys, and then there's going to be a surprise. The team that I keep coming back to, and I don't know why. Well, I guess I know why, because I think that he's the guy, who would take a quarterback is the Patriots. They're not in trouble at the position. They're not set at the position. And so, and they're kind of in the middle of the round like the Bears, but that's another team I would keep an eye on.
I'd throw out the Rams there too. I know I was just talking about them moving down, but Matthew Stafford's been hurt a lot.
Back issues. Yeah.
Yeah. They could be looking for some security there at the quarterback spot.
Guys, another team that I heard other folks talking about, I wasn't thinking about it, but it's not because they have a need so much as they don't know what they have, is the Green Bay Packers, who just traded Aaron Rodgers and they drafted a quarterback high a couple of years ago, but, they have no idea what they have. And again, this becomes a question of how highly valued are these numbers 4, 5, and 6.
Is it just me, or are Packers fans getting a little bit cocky because of the transition, how smoothly it went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, where there seems to be an air of confidence that they can make this work with Jordan Love? And I'm not saying that they can. It's has it been 4 years since Jordan Love was drafted? It's been a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that cocky isn't the word. Panicked might be a better word, because it ain't going to happen again. I mean, you don't go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and then have it happen again. In some respects, it's no different than where the Bears are at. They don't know where they're at the position right now. And so, any team that doesn't know, guys, the Bears can take a quarterback in the second or third round. I wouldn't with the 2 number ones, next year. And I am more confident than that in Justin Fields than I would do it right now. But if they love Hooker or if they think, that Levis is the guy, I hope not. I can't see that. But if one of them
can't see that happen.
But if one of them were I'll tell you what, if one of them were to drop to 53, then I think you got to at least consider it if they drop that low. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Kyle, everyone's optimistic in April. That's what I'll say about your Packers comment. Everyone's optimistic right now. Everyone had a great night last night.
I'm trying to figure out if Packer fans are really as confident as they seem to be coming off, or if it's just trying to rationalize the situation that they're currently in. But anyway, guys, we're getting toward an hour. We're at an hour here. Got to go get about the 3rd cup of coffee this morning to try and stay awake. It's going to be a long night. Anything you guys want to hit on, though, before we jump out of here?
Guys, I think from the Bears' perspective, something that we talked about before we started, and it's an hour later and we haven't really gotten to it yet, but I think it's worth mentioning. You talk about Packers fans, getting cocky or being confident. I think that Bears fans may have missed a little something here in that I like most of, if not everything that Ryan Poles has done so far, but we've been living with this idea that the Bears are loaded with assets and that the rebuild is going to go fast and that they're going to get a bunch of great players this year. The reality is, picking only at 10th in the top 53 is that they're not loaded. They have already quite possibly done as much as they're going to be able to do this year in getting immediate starters, future potential Pro Bowlers. They've got, multiple 2nd-round picks. They've got the top pick in the 3rd round. Those are good things to have. But when you're talking about a complete rebuild, they've already used, most of their assets to really make a big move. And so if there's going to be significant change this year, it's probably going to happen with the bulk of the guys they've already accomplished in free agency and hopefully with Wright. And the trade for Moore is a big deal too. Let's not forget that, or I shouldn't forget that. But I think that we've spent the last couple months overrating a little bit how much the Bears can get done in this offseason or early this offseason, because even though they've got multiple picks now, they're not high picks, and I don't know that they're going to get a lot more really exciting prospects today or tomorrow.
Yeah, and that trade last night with the Eagles to move down from 9 to 10, it just reiterates that Ryan Poles is looking at this thing, through a really long lens. And I know it's only a 4th-round pick, but he's still thinking about next year's draft. This thing isn't gonna be done after Saturday. They're gonna have a long way to go still. But I think you can be excited about especially with these 2nd and 3rd round picks. These are guys you hope become starters, and so there's reason to be excited going into tonight because the Bears hopefully can get a couple of starters.
All right, guys, let's get out of here. Make sure you stick with us at shawlocal.com. A ton of content still to come your way. Once again, do us a favor. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment. Really, really does help it. We appreciate it every time you guys do that. Follow us on Twitter at hub_arkish, at Sean_Hammond, at Kyle Neighbors. You can also follow our main account at Bears_Insider. You'll get all of our content coming to you that way. Guys, it's been fun. It's going to be a wild second night. The NFL draft is a good time. We're going to be back with you on Monday morning to recap everything at 10 a.m. Until then, though, guys, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy, hopefully, a lot of intriguing picks from the Bears. And until then, we'll talk to you guys later, I guess. Bye, guys.